Hey everybody, Nick here. Recently, I had the distinct privilege of getting to play with the Xelmus Apollo Anamorphic A set, the 40, 60, and 100mm lenses. I posted about that in a recent video, and in it, I described the Xelmus Apollo lenses as arguably the best anamorphic glass that money can buy. They have a look that's pretty similar to the legendary Panavision C series, but in a relatively small and lightweight package, only about 1,800 grams a lens, and with astonishingly good close focus of about 16 inches for most focal lengths. To me, these things are just amazing, with the drawbacks of slightly lower resolution than I'd ideally like to see, a higher sensitivity to veiling glare, and some subtle color things that can take a bit of time and care in post. They're otherwise quite extraordinary. In an ideal world, I'd own a set of these alongside a set of really good spherical lenses, not as a replacement, but as a companion. Right now, my principal set of sphericals is the Film Aral Primes. They have so much going for them, and they're often just glued to my camera, but I've had a lot of fun with the Xelmus Apollos as well. But why am I making another video about them? I mean, well, honestly, I could just post more demo footage from them, and that in itself would be pretty fun and I think valuable for a lot of people because there isn't a lot of demo footage out there for these lenses, but that's not why I'm here today. The Apollos aren't mine, as much as I wish they were. They belong to a local colleague named Riley Hanlon. And he told me that as much as he likes them, his work often requires him to deliver mixed format content, things that can be reasonably well cropped to either portrait or landscape orientations. It's a very common request these days because so many people consume content on mobile devices in portrait orientation. And sadly, if you're shooting an anamorphic lens which stretches everything sideways, cutting your resolution by the amount of the stretch factor, not to mention the generally lower resolution from the cylindrical optics themselves, cropping in even further for vertical delivery isn't always feasible. However, this is where another modern technique comes into play. PL flanges are built in a 4-leaf clover with a cutout on the leaves that mates with a locating pin on the PL mount. This orients the lens with the horizon of your camera and serves multiple purposes. For one thing, on a large set, it's important that the correct lens markings be visible in a predictable spot for the camera operator, the first AC, etc. On anamorphic lenses, the horizon lock serves a second purpose in that it is critical to making sure that the stretch is level so that your image is as it should be, with horizontal flares and vertical bokeh. But getting back to our age of iPhones dilemma, what if you wanted to use a different orientation? Since an anamorphic lens essentially stretches things, what if we switch what's being stretched? We can put the camera on its side so that the sensor is now in portrait orientation. And then if we stretch that image sideways, if we use something like a 2-time stretch on something like a 16:9 sensor, you stretch that to 16:18, nearly a perfect square. And with that, you can frame your composition with an eye for cropping down to mixed format deliveries without losing a whole lot of resolution in the process. All you'd need is a PL flange that has multiple notches, not just the single one. That way, when you rotate the camera, that locating pin moves, the lens has a new notch to accept it, and still retains its perfect 90-degree angles. I didn't invent this technique. It's been around for a long time. Atlas gets a lot of press as forerunners here because their PL flanges have always been able to accommodate this technique, but it significantly predates Atlas as well. Also, side note, yes, you could either remove or relocate the PL mount's locating pin as an alternative to multiple notches, but in my opinion, the most straightforward and versatile way to achieve this technique is just to have multiple notches on the PL flange. And most modern lenses manufactured now do indeed have notches on all 4 leaves of their PL clover, but Xelmus is a holdout. They only machine 1 notch on their flange, and they won't even cut more on request. Despite the fact that they make all their parts custom, including the flanges, and despite the fact that it's a very simple machining operation with 0 downsides, they just won't do it. I asked them if it's possible to order a lens with multiple cutouts, and they said no. But, like I just said, it's a very easy machining operation. And Riley, the owner of these lenses, was very interested in my description of how I might go about accomplishing such a modification. I told him there's a non-zero risk that something could be messed up in the process by trying to cut a hole in your lens. After all, I don't have a real machine shop. I just have like a drill press and some basic hand tools. But nevertheless, Riley was game. He accepted the risk and he wanted it done, so we were off to the races. Step 1 was measuring. While some elements of the PL flange are of course standard, there are variations in how that standard is implemented. So I busted out the calipers, measured a bunch of stuff, wrote it all down, and then recreated almost the entirety of the outer surface of this lens in 3D. Next up, I designed and printed a little 3D jig that would act as a drilling guide for me, putting the cuts exactly where I wanted them. I bought some special carbide drill bits to help ensure that the primary circular holes would drill straight and true. Busted out my Dremel to cut the side notches, a little cleanup work, and voila! Each lens now has 4 notches around the PL clover. There was a little more to this process that I'm skipping over, and you definitely don't want to do this. This is not something that I recommend. These lenses are delicate. Removing the PL flange causes the internal elements to sit unsupported. The entire rear group leans over like the Tower of Pisa because the flange actually acts as a mechanical constraint which determines the concentricity and axiality of that rear group. There are like these tiny little nylon rollers built into the flange. It's wild. And that's just one thing. There were others. Anyway, I'm not offering this as a service. I'm not selling or giving away the drilling guide I designed. This was just a one-off for my own interest and for the benefit of my colleague who owns these lenses. This video is meant purely for entertainment, not education. I'm just telling you the basic process of what I did. Do with this information what you will. Anyway, we now have perhaps the world's only Xelmus Apollo lenses which can be oriented in any position. What's cool about that isn't just the ability to capture the square format, but that you can turn that square on its side. Leaving the camera level, but orienting the lens 90 degrees stretches the image vertically. Same basic square image, but now your bokeh stretches horizontally and your flares streak vertically. Again, Atlas has published some content with this general idea. There was some of it made for the launch of their Mercury lenses, but it's really cool to see with the ultra complex and detailed flares of the Xelmus Apollo lenses, which have so much unique definition in the lines and the blobs. They're gorgeous. It's easily my favorite flare of any lens I've ever used. Now, remember that one of the prerequisites for using this technique is that your lens can cover the entire sensor, even when rotated. That's not true for all lenses. The Apollos here, they don't project a circle. They project more of like a rectangular blob, which is wider than it is tall, and each successive focal length projects a larger rectangle. The 40mm here just barely covers full frame. So when you turn it on its side, it can't quite cover the entire 41mm width of the Raptor's sensor. When using the 40mm in square format on the Raptor, I have to crop into Super 35 6K. The 60mm covers just fine, and everything longer than that will also cover. Another thing to consider is that the farther out into the imaging area you get, the more funkiness you get. Like the outer 20% of the entire image on all sides is just going to be completely out of focus no matter what you do. So you have to frame a bit more center punch. That's probably not much of a deal breaker, especially if your goal is mixed format delivery. You probably want a center punch image anyway so that you can crop in different directions, but it's also going to be a bit of a rigging hassle. Getting the camera to sit sideways and then the monitors to sit where you want can take a little bit of work. And crucially, with a 2x stretch lens rotated sideways, your monitor needs to be capable of de-squeezing at a factor of 0.5. Small HD monitors can do this, including the DSMC3 monitor, but if you want to do this on a smaller rig, either add a small HD monitor or make sure that your specific monitor can handle custom stretch factors down to 0.5. Anyway, in my book, square format is just one more unique storytelling tool. Is it something I'll personally be doing a lot of? Probably not. It's a big hassle and probably not often worth the effort, but I'm happy that it can be done. I especially love what the vertical flares look like. Sometimes they're really super fun. Once again, big thanks to Riley Hanlon for letting me play with these super special lenses and for trusting me to modify them. Even with my complaints, these are some of the best anamorphic optics you can get anywhere. The things I've complained about, resolution, color fidelity, you're going to get these with some of the best loved glass in the world. Things like Lomo square fronts or vintage cowl lenses, they all have their little quirks and logistical hiccups. What's so cool about the Xelmus lenses is that they exist, they're relatively small, they focus so close, and they still deliver that timeless look. I'm a sucker for my Arl sphericals. They're always a bit more practical to use compared to anamorphic, and they always deliver a stunning image, but a lens like the Apollo delivers something that you just can't get any other way. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. I hope you enjoyed this crazy experiment and the demo footage that went along with it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.